Welcome to Cicada Rising, where fear takes flight and the truth lies in the shadows. Prepare to be captivated by true accounts of the supernatural, eerie encounters, and unexplained mysteries. Brace yourself for a journey into the shadows, where every whisper and every creak could be a harbinger of something beyond comprehension. Now let's begin. I have a horrible secret and I need to share it with someone. Everyone I talk to dies. You may not believe it. I don't blame you. I wouldn't either. I grew up a very quiet child. I remember screaming, "I hate you," at my father when he grounded me for talking back because I didn't want to clean my room. Not my finest moment. But when Mom came downstairs the next morning crying and screaming his name, my anger vanished. The doctors said he died overnight. His heart had stopped. They said it wasn't anyone's fault. I believed them. For the next few years, everything was normal except one thing. I didn't speak. The doctors said it was my way of coping with the trauma. I learned ASL to communicate. Because I was a fairly sickly child, Mom homeschooled me. So it wasn't really an issue. One day I was in town when some strangers approached me. Unbeknownst to me, they were well-known bullies at the neighborhood school. I took off running, but they cornered me in an alley. As they closed in, one of them punched me. Panicked, I looked at him and for the first time in years screamed, "Leave me alone." While they were shocked, I pushed past them and ran home. I thought it was over. The next day I learned that a local boy had died overnight from heart failure. I recognized him immediately as my attacker from the alley. Jim. His name was Jim. Once his chance, twice his coincidence. I couldn't let it become a pattern. In the coming years, I moved into my own apartment and became a recluse. It's amazing how much you can do without speaking to anyone. Food and grocery delivery apps, email and file transfers, online bill payments. Talking is overrated. Years passed, and I got sicker and sicker. Mom worried, but I accepted it. Then one night I awoke to the sound of my apartment door being forced open. I texted 911 and hid. But minutes later, my bedroom door crashed in. As a knife descended toward me, I looked at my attacker and screamed, "Stop!" At that moment, police streamed in and tackled him, and I ran. The next day, as I recovered from my ordeal, I received a call my attacker had died in his cell overnight. And I felt better, stronger, more alive, like I'd been reborn. That's when I realized the connection. Each death gave me life. I've tried to fight it. I've stayed hidden away, silent. But nothing lasts forever. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you this. That's where the secret comes in. As freeing as it's been to unburden myself, this wasn't a story. It was a goodbye. You see, lately I've been missing that feeling, craving it. And what's more, I've recently discovered that my gift works through writing too. So if you're reading this, hello, it's nice to meet you, and I'm sorry. What can I say? I'm the employee of a horrifying shape-shifting monster. But it's just the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it was all working fine until Sharon was eaten. Sharon was too obvious, and now the whole cover-up will be blown. You'll hear it in the news, so I might as well tell you now. Yeah, we knew Dwayne was a monster, like a real one. We think he might have come from space, but it doesn't really matter now. He would eat customers, that much is true. For the most part, only old elderly ones that came alone at night. But those weren't the ones we were worried about. It was the high-risk customers, once every 4 months or so, that we had to be vigilant about. It always happened around his own system of holidays. What were his holidays? Well, let me explain. June 7th, Stomp Day. Stomp Day was Stomp Day. You arrived at 8 a.m. sharp and were paid a lot of money to stay for the next 14 hours, instead of 8. At about a dozen different times throughout the day, you'd stomp the ground as hard as you could. The idea was to hide it. Like, sorry, I was carrying this big load of plywood, and so I accidentally stomped as I almost lost balance. Or you could just stomp on a pallet jack to prevent swerving. You'd be surprised at how many discreet ways you can stomp right by a person's face and get away with it. The purpose of the stomping was to make customers flinch. which had something to do with building up a certain level of unease in the store. At the end of the day, the employee who could get the most flinches was awarded 3 months' pay and an all-black Rubik's Cube. I'll get to that later. The hardest part was that you were competing with everyone else, and you were only allotted 7 tries at specific timestamps in the day, or time stomps as we called them. Everyone's time stomps were different. Mine were 8:21, 9:10:37, 11:40, 21:32, 21:33, 21:34. It was easiest just to set alarms on your phone. I always brought a spare battery for my dying iPhone 10. Anyway, if you could get someone really startled, Dwayne would show up and be very apologetic and tell the customer they can get a free DeWalt power drill from the back. He would take them into the loading bay and into that room none of us were allowed in. You'll see it on the news. And then, well, the customer would be gone forever. But trust me, no one noticed. It's why we were able to get away with it for so long. Dwayne had some intuitive way of choosing single, fairly antisocial people, usually homeowners. So when they disappeared, it took a while for friends and family to catch on, and the police never had any leads. October 14th, St. Quelbert's cleaning day. Before you go asking who St. Quelbert is, we have no fucking clue. I should explain that Dwayne definitely does not speak English as his first language. I'd love to get some linguist or geneticist to tell me where he could possibly be from. Apparently, Quelbert is some priest, an angel, maybe Dwayne's mother. For whatever reason, Dwayne settled on the name St. Quelbert, and we just rolled with it. There wasn't any hard start to this holiday. You could book any kind of 6 or 8 hour shift, but if you were working on St. Quelbert's, you'd better bring a bandana or N95 mask. Dwayne would basically fumigate the entire store with some chemical I can only describe as minty bleach. We would put up signs throughout the store that said we are having a cleaning day. Customers seemed to put up with it. Everyone just grabbed a courtesy COVID mask from the front and did their shopping as usual. But the closer you got to the back of the store, the stronger that minty bleach smell got. I should mention it wasn't like a hazy smoke or anything. It was completely translucent. More of a mist. If you were working on this day, you had to carry a rag in your back pocket and clean any stains you spotted on the floor or shelves. The substance in the air basically made any stain come out instantly. Yeah, I hated to think what it might have done to my eyes and skin, but I never had any adverse reactions, thank God. Inevitably, some customer with asthma or a cold or something would have a coughing fit and start spewing up phlegm. If the customer met Dwayne's criteria, he would graciously offer them the employee washroom in the back, where they could go clean themselves up. And then, yup, you guessed it, he would eat them. But listen, we knew he ate people. I'm not pretending we didn't. We're definitely guilty of that. We just never directly killed anyone ourselves. We were at worst accessories to murder, or coerced into compliance. In fact, I know it seems like we only enabled his behavior, which is true, but we were kind of forced to play along. It'll make more sense when I explain the next holiday. March 24th, annual graduation. If you want to work at Dwayne's Depot, you have to sign a year-long contract. It was very explicit. Dwayne always explained to new employees that he's sick of high turnover, so he would guarantee you a customer service job, fairly well paying, as long as you committed to a year. Obviously, the law states you can give your 2 weeks' notice at any job and leave, but Dwayne makes you sign an incredibly sophisticated contract that supposedly circumvents this law. As you'd imagine, this deters a lot of people, which is totally fine. Dwayne only seeks the committed. And so he filters out applicants until he gets someone who is desperate for a stable, decent-paying job with little experience. For example, high school dropouts like me. Anyway, after a year of work, you are allowed to quit, but only on graduation day, which is generally 365 days after you started. On your graduation, Dwayne invites all the employees into the loading bay, and he sings you a song which is unlike anything you've ever heard, and is genuinely impossible to describe. Afterwards, he gives you a white rubber band with a certain number of tally marks, which I think corresponds to how many people you helped him eat that year. And then you can either move on with your life, keep working part-time at Dwayne's, or commit to another full year with a triple wage increase. We all told Sharon to wait, just hold out until her graduation on March 27th. Once she got her first white rubber band, she could leave. I'll admit to that in court. Listen, I'm being super upfront about all of this. But she couldn't. She was a week away from her graduation when she snapped. Apparently, she had snuck into Dwayne's room and saw something. Probably the eating process. On the day of her meltdown, I was at the opposite end of the depot when she grabbed a megaphone, which we sell in aisle 30 for about $80. I heard the buzzy click of the megaphone turning on, and then I heard Sharon's hysterical shouts. "We work for a monster. People have died here," etc., etc. I rushed over to shut her up, of course, as did 2 other employees, but she refused to be subdued. Very soon, Dwayne showed up, wiping his mouth and demanding to know what was going on. She tossed the megaphone at him and ran. And so, Dwayne chased her into the parking lot. The open-air customer parking lot in broad daylight in front of like 20 people. Dwayne caught her by the hair and shrieked an unfathomable sound, like a space lion roar or something. He pulled one of those black Rubik's cubes out from his pocket and basically sucked Sharon into it. Customers freaked out. Cars sped away. It was a fucking scene. We all stared with our jaws dropped, not knowing what to do. Dwayne just stared back and said, "What are you looking at? Get back to work." The reason I think that Sharon was eaten was because the black cubes were how Dwayne stored his prey. And yes, before you ask, I do have 2 of them. They were awarded to me on some very successful stomp days. No, I have not opened them. I have no clue how they work. And yes, I will be giving them to the police. Honestly, it may not sound like my hands were tied, but my hands were tied. Where else was I supposed to work? I don't have a degree and don't qualify for anything in finance, STEM, healthcare, or whatever. I applied to every other place in my neighborhood. I could only land a job at Dwayne's. Obviously, I should go to jail, and I will. But I can't possibly deserve more than 18 months. Like 2 years tops with good behavior? Thanks to Dwayne, I've been able to afford the crazy high rent in this city, pay for food, and now I have enough to pay for school, too. I'm just reading this all out here so you can see my side of the story, before the news media spins everything out of control. Anyway, please DM me if you know a good lawyer. After this all blows over, I'm going to medical school with a goal to save at least 254 lives. 254 because that's how many tally marks I counted on my white rubber bands. I should not tell you the secrets of the mine, but I will. The town of Kiruna is special. Superficially, it is a humble mining community located between the mountains Luossavaara and Kirunavaara. Extensively, it harbors many a nightmare deep underground. But we don't talk about that usually. Giron, as it is called in the native tongue, was founded in the year 1900. The history stretches back further, however. As early as the 15th century, brave explorers trekked through the treacherous terrain and found evidence of iron deposits in the ground. I think about them a lot. I wonder if they knew what their discovery would bring. Did they see what we have seen? You see, as the mine started developing, so did the town. The town soon became a small city, and at its peak it supplied 2/3 of the world's iron. But open pit mining soon became dangerous. The edges of the pit started collapsing, and the decision was made to continue underground. With time, the ground became porous, miles and miles of tunnels snaking through granite, threatening the stability of the very foundation the city stood upon. Rationally, you may think this was a good time to stop, but greed knows no bounds. Instead, the city was to be moved. Thousands of lives uprooted, including mine. The local government has time and time again blamed this on the threat of collapse. However, townsfolk whisper in the night, rumors of something inexplicable, something terrible, residing in the mines of Kiruna, a furious, ancient presence. As a worker for the company, your natural instinct is to protect your livelihood. But I must now face facts. We disturbed the order. We dug too deep. I am here to tell you what I have seen. I started my current job decades ago. I was born here, raised here. It was only natural for me to work here as well. I took pride in the storied tradition of my home. Nationally, the miner is regarded with subtle contempt, but we are treated like heroes here. They call us men of iron. The first story I want to share with you took place during my first week all those years ago. It wasn't particularly scary back then, but I was young and naive. During the first couple of days, I didn't do much in the way of work, because they had a whole introduction planned for the new hires. They'd take us down for visits in the old pit, tell us about the history of the company, stuff like that. But soon the information we received turned weird. They spoon-fed us the weirdness. Never too much at once, sprinkled throughout boring presentations on quotas and the like. I remember vividly that our handler showed us a graph of some sort. Profits, I'd wager. There were dips, and one of my colleagues remarked on the fact that they seemed to occur periodically, almost to the exact date. 4 months and change in between each decrease. Our handler told us that they shut the mine down during a week each time. When I asked why, I expected some kind of logical explanation, but alas. Apparently those dips in profits coincided with the increased frequency of sightings of something she called Jägarögon, eyes of the hunter. I recognized fear in her face when she told us this, but chalked it up to superstition. I wouldn't get an explanation for what they were until much later. The miners do not like to talk about the strange things going on down there, especially not this. But we will get to that. First, I'll tell you about the time I realized that the mines were alive. A year into my employment, nothing had gone wrong yet. There were a couple of workers going missing in the deep dark, but this was not out of the ordinary. We mourned them. Not much else to do. The interesting part was that we never found their bodies. Not one. I had this in mind as I walked the tunnels with a small exploratory group. Sure, iron is the main interest of the company, but that doesn't mean they want to hedge their bets to one product. Me and 4 others were conducting tests to find traces of valuables in a lesser-known part of the system. I crouched on the slope of the wall and gathered my equipment from my bag. A small bore, a strip of pH indicator, and a glass container for the samples. I won't bore you, pun intended, with the minutiae of gathering samples, so let's just say that I did my thing. I always liked being close to rock. In front of me were the bones of Earth itself, silently bearing the weight of all known life. It's hard not to feel insignificant at that prospect, again, pun intended. But I enjoyed that feeling. It made me forget about the struggles above ground for just a moment. I spaced out and didn't snap out of it until I heard something. It was like the behemoth in front of me whispered something. The rock begged me to get closer, to look at it. I did so. Suddenly I was alone. When I turned around, I couldn't see any of the others. I called out for them, no answer. And when I thought about it for a bit, did the tunnel really look the same as before? I did what we were told not to do when lost, walk around. After all, this was not the same place I got lost. I must have been alone for hours, aimlessly searching for the rest of the group. I'll tell you something, I'm typically a masculine man. But when you're alone down there, real fear sets in. You scan your surroundings with your torch, and every shadow is a threat. And I could hear the walls breathe, and I could see the walls shift, ever so slightly. Sometimes it even looked biological. I started carving crosses on the ground to keep my bearing, but every time I turned back there would be no sign of them. Then my flashlight went out. I sat down to accept my fate. "You fucking idiot," a voice woke me up. I was completely out of it, confused. "You never listen to the mountain. I learned that the caves like to play tricks on you, transport you elsewhere, try to get you to slip up, lose your cool, and wander off into the unknown. I was told that I had some unimaginable luck. The other place I got sent to was just a kilometer to the east, an area also owned by the company. Thank God. I started bringing earmuffs after that incident. With time, I would become more experienced, both in regards to my work and how to stay safe under Kirunavara. One of the most terrifying facts about the mines is that you could never know if your colleague right next to you actually is what he seems. Reports had been filed, telling upper management about the appearance of a long-lost miner. Apparently, he had just waltzed right into a group of people at the bottom of the lift, as if nothing was wrong. At first they hadn't recognized him, but as they shone their lights on him, it was unmistakable. That man had been gone for over 2 years. When they reacted appropriately, he just looked at them with a blank stare. Not quite human, someone had described his expression. The company knew more about this than they let on. How do I know this? Well, because they promptly disposed of him. Or it. And soon after, 4 months after the last time, the eyes started appearing. The mine shut down for a week. During this time, the company managed to quell any rumors stemming from the incident hush-hush. I have gotten access to documents that estimate that around 3% of the total force has been replaced by these look-alikes. If the mountain hadn't slipped up and used the vessel of someone that shouldn't be there, we may have never known. With this in mind, the sporadic, violent outbursts of some workers can be explained. It may not be cave insanity, but rather this. I shudder at the thought of having unknowingly walked beside these things, maybe even shared a cup of coffee with one, doing something innately human, with something not quite human. It is all part of the trickery. Those flesh dolls try to get you to break the rules, and when you don't, they break character. They're a catalyst. That's why we increase the size of groups to a minimum of 7 people. However, there's always a slim chance that you may be the only real person in it. So if you plan to work here and see someone in the dark, alone, moving strangely, run the other direction. Even if the tunnels change on you, getting lost is a far better fate than whatever happens to the replaced. I think it's time I explain what an Eye of the Hunter is. I will tell you about them in exactly the same way I was told. You're new here. You've heard about some of the strange things going on, but haven't experienced anything on your own. Work is going fine, and you tell your wife about how good of a job you're doing before bed every day. She is proud. Weeks pass, the initial excitement dies down, and you realize that you do tough, manual labor for a criminally low fee. Your days become monotonous, and you stop telling your wife about them, even if she still calls you her man of iron. You need money, you need more. You want to buy her everything she wants, she's too good for you. One day you hear whispers in the break room. Something about off-hour gold expeditions, unsanctioned by the company, of course. They notice you listening and offer a spot on the team in exchange for your silence. You gladly accept. Good for you. You tell your wife that you had to cover the graveyard shift and drive towards the mine. We don't work at night. The guys are all there, waiting for you. Some have brought their own equipment. Lights, drills, hammers. All you need is there. In the dead of night, you climb over fences, dodge the vision of the cameras, and sneak into the elevator. It starts its descent. We have heard about a large vein, mostly left untouched, they'll tell you. Why, you'll ask, but you do not get an answer. Fine, you'll still be rich enough for an early pension by tomorrow morning. But until then, a long night's work awaits the group. You look around. Grizzled faces, slowly worn down by years of hard work. You're the youngest, and it's an honor to be around these men. But doesn't that man look a little off? The skin under his eyes too saggy. The faint smile he sends your way, off-putting. Must be the light. You and your newfound brothers start the journey. Tunnel after tunnel. Darkness only broken up by the crisscrossing beams of your torches. One of the more senior members stops periodically, checks his map, then continues. They tell stories, mostly nostalgic, light-hearted ones. Maybe there are mermaids for miners. Wouldn't that be nice, they'll say. You start to feel almost comfortable in the presence of these men, despite the fact that you are deeper underground and further away from known territory than you've ever been. You start thinking about that necklace you'll buy for your wife. You wonder if she's sleeping right now. The man in front stops. This area shifts a lot. You can't help but feel a bit proud. You know what this means. You suggest that some of you will stay behind, keep in line of sight with the others. The minds can't shift then, only if you listen to the mountain, but you all know better than to do that. 3 of the men start walking towards the deposit of gold, leaving you and the strange man from the elevator to stand back. You talk about sports, he seems to not care. You tell him to stop looking at you. You need 2 pairs of eyes to watch the others, in case one of you needs to blink. But somehow he doesn't seem to blink. You see the other men hard at work, their beams moving across the roof of the cavern. The man standing next to you brings something to your attention. It's a hole in the rocky wall. It is very smooth, concave in shape. It doesn't really look like any kind of formation you've learned about, almost like it was made by something other than the gentle scrubbing of water for eons. The man asks you to look into the hole while he keeps watch over the others. Mistake. The last one you'll ever make. The hole is completely straight and goes on for what seems like infinity. It gradually becomes thinner and thinner. Your light can't reach the end of it, but you can still see that the thinnest part is no thicker than the head of a needle. What you do not know yet is that something is crawling in there, in the long dark, coming towards you. Strange, you think, and go back to watching the men at work. Sometime later, 2 thin hands will grab the edges of the hole from within. They're black as black can be, or rather devoid of any color. Thin, awfully long fingers feel around the edges for something to grip onto, and when they finally do, it's over for you. It happens too fast to register. Something lunges at you from the depths of the hole. One of the men hears the commotion and turns around. He screams, but they all know the ending. Now they can just pray that you hit your head during the struggle so hard that you die immediately. But you didn't. The thing drags you into the hole with desperate vigor, disjointed pulling. It has you by the arm, so you're facing away from the exit. You stare into the face of that thing. Despite the darkness, a white smile greets you. A perfectly white smile and 2 large, perfectly white eyes, with a small black dot in each. The last thing you will see. It drags you onwards. Deeper into the mountain, the hole is getting smaller, and you feel your ribs tightening. You can't breathe. Bones in your body shatter. You start turning to pulp. It goes on and on for what feels like an impossible amount of time. Until, at this point in the story, the drunken miner who told me it stopped. He just looked out towards the horizon, terrified. I didn't poke around further. I had heard enough. That hole was an eye, and you never look into it. That's how they hunt. When they, or it, we do not know if it's a single entity or many, spot a pair of human eyes, they start their crawl. Then, when it knows the victim is facing away, they stretch out their arms as far as they can, sometimes several tens of meters as to not be seen. At this stage, many have reported the sound of cracking bones. So at least those things suffer a little in the process, hopefully. They then use the force stored in their stretched arms to slingshot themselves out of the hole, grabbing their victim, and then disappearing back into the void. A horrible way to go. I have never seen one of the creatures, only their holes, their eyes. But I have been there once when it happened. A coworker had gazed into one of them, thinking it was another kind of hole, one that indicated the presence of iron-rich granite. The eyes weren't in season at that time, only 2 months since the last appearance. I guess he thought it was safe to take a peek. By the time I realized he had already been grabbed, I managed to get a hold of his leg, but it was futile. I got pulled into the wall and lost my grip. I broke my jaw. Then he was gone. Faint screams emanated from the eye for 3 minutes. After this, I asked to be put on desk duty. I vowed to never step foot underground again, at least not that particular ground. Sometimes I miss the good parts about it, though. But when you slip up doing paperwork, you'll get, at most, an earful from a superior. When you slip up down there, you die. Well, you die after an excruciating amount of pain has been inflicted on you. There are many other stories from the deep, many other rules that had to be followed. One time we found some sort of inscription on carefully carved blocks of marble. The symbols were ancient, apparently. Unknown language, apparently. But that's up to the scientists to figure out. I think that if they do crack it, we will understand the evil there. For now, though, I'll sign off. I have a long day of paperwork tomorrow. It's been 4 months since the last cycle ended, so I'll have to prepare the documents for a week-long shutdown. Hi, I, 24-year-old man, have 2 loving parents that live around 3 miles away from me. They are just about the best parents I could ask for. They support me, give me advice, and even loan me some money when I'm in a pickle. The part I want to focus on today started about 3 weeks back. I headed over to their house for dinner. This is a weekly occurrence. But for some reason, they weren't home. I called to ask where they were, but no one answered. That isn't like them. They always answer phone calls. I waited for a while to see if they had just run to the store, but it took them about an hour to get back home. When they got back home, they were acting strange. When I asked them why they were gone, they just walked right by me, not even acknowledging my presence. They got inside and locked the door. I thought this was odd, but I didn't know if they just hadn't heard me. I knocked on the door and looked through the window. As soon as I knocked, it was like they had just broken out of a trance. They came to the door and asked me why I was late. I tried to explain what happened, but they didn't believe me. I came in and smelled burning. I ran to the kitchen to see that dinner had been burnt to a crisp. My parents said that they had only put it in about an hour ago. From what I could tell, it looked like it was sitting in there for about 3. It was like my parents had no memory from the past hour and a half. When I asked them where they went, they said that they had been home all night. I again tried to explain to them that they had been gone for more than an hour. But they just looked at me like I was crazy. Honestly, I had a very long week at work, so I kind of just chalked it up to little sleep. We had to go out to eat that night since dinner was reduced to a charred black mass. To be honest, it was pretty nice. The next week I went over and it was like normal. Dinner was almost ready and my dad was watching the game. When my mom asked me to dress the table, there was a very large book lying cover down. I'm talking a tome-sized book. It was massive. I called out to my mom. "I didn't know you liked to read so much." She hurried over and hid the book behind her back like a kid hiding a cookie they took from the cookie jar. Her eyes were really wide, and she hurried off to the bedroom. Eventually, she came back and her mood had switched up. It was like one moment she was happy and fine, and the next it was like she was angry at me. I didn't really want to push her any more than I already had since she seemed so upset. We had dinner, and after she seemed to have forgot about the whole event. She told me to fetch her purse from her room. When I went in there, the book was sitting on the bed. I finally got a chance to see the cover, and well, it was pretty disturbing. There was a picture of a deity holding a heart in one hand and a dagger in the other. It had a goat's head and a man's body. I picked up the book and flipped through it. The contents were grotesque. There were illustrations of what I could only describe as demons and diagrams of the human body in various states of decomposition. The title page was written in Latin. I put the book down and grabbed the purse. Whatever else was in the book, I didn't want to know. I brushed it off and walked back into the kitchen, trying to hide the fact that I looked through the book. After I gave my mom the purse, I made an excuse to leave. I said that I had to go because my girlfriend was locked out of the house and I needed to let her in. They said goodbye and I went home. On the drive home, I felt off. I knew there was something going on. I just didn't know what. First it was the weird trance thing, then it was the weird occult book that they didn't want me to see. When I got home, I did some research and found the deity. Its name was Baphomet. Apparently, Baphomet is a representation of the devil. Next week, I was debating saying that I was sick, so I didn't have to go over there and experience any more weirdness. I decided against it, seeing that they are my parents and all. After all, they might not even own the book. They might just be holding on to it for one of their friends. When I went over last night, they had my childhood room closed. They said that they had recently painted and that they didn't want the paint smell to stink up the whole house. We ate dinner and everything was pretty normal. After dinner, my parents ran out of dish soap, so they had to go to the store. They said that I was free to stay while they were gone. They said that they wouldn't be gone for more than 15 minutes. I decided that this would be a good time to open up the room that my parents had closed off. I was curious about what color they had painted it, seeing as it was the room that I grew up in. When I opened the door, I was hit with a stench and the sight of a circle with a star in the middle. There were candles where the points of the star were touching the circle. In the middle, there was a small bag. I picked it up and I could instantly tell that this was the source of the odor. It smelled like death. I opened it up out of curiosity and couldn't tell what was inside. There were things that were small and kind of shiny. I turned my phone's flashlight on and got a better look. It was teeth. These weren't any animal teeth either, they were human. I examined the circle closer and found a red, sticky substance in the middle, almost like blood. Hell, it probably was blood now that I look back at it. There was a small dresser in the room. Sitting atop the dresser was a dagger. It looked like something you would see off of a movie. This dagger had blood on it too. Just then, I heard the door of my parents' car shut as they made their way to the front door. I had to act fast. I quickly rushed around the house to the back door. I opened and closed it as quietly as possible. As soon as I heard the front door close, I opened up the gate and made my escape to my car. I had exited so fast that I didn't even realize that I was still clutching the bag of teeth in my hand. I tossed the bag out of my window and sped off. The only thought running through my mind was, this can't be real. As soon as I got home, I got a call from my mother. She asked me why I headed home so early. I told them that my girlfriend forgot her keys again, and I had to let her back in. After I got done saying that, I could hear my father yelling to my mother about something. My mother said that she would need to call me back. She didn't even say she loved me or anything, she just hung up. This was very out of character. Fast forward to today and my mother called me back. I had dreaded this call all last night. I didn't get a wink of sleep. I answered the phone and my mother's voice came through. "We know you saw it," she said. I didn't respond. "All you had to do was not open the door. You could have been spared. Now he will want to end your miserable existence." I didn't need to be clued in on who she was talking about. She was talking about the deity on the book. She let out a bone-chilling laugh and continued. "He is telling me to bring you to him," she said. I then heard a knock through the phone. What was unsettling about it was that I heard a knock coming from my door too. I instantly hung the phone up. I turned off every light I could think of and hid in my bedroom upstairs. Thankfully, my girlfriend was at work. I dialed 911 and the operator asked if she was still there. I peeped through my blinds to see if she was, and she was standing on my porch. She had the dagger in her hands, though this time it was clean of blood. As I was telling the operator where she was, she suddenly jolted her gaze to my window. I shut the blinds as fast as humanly possible and ducked under the windowsill. I didn't know if she had seen me or not. She then began banging loudly on my door. The operator stated that there was a patrol car very close by and that they should be there very soon. I waited for about 2 minutes on the phone with the operator before the banging stopped. A moment later, the operator said that the cruiser had just pulled up. The police knocked and I answered. They said that they didn't see anything, but they noticed how rattled I was and offered to patrol around the neighborhood. I obliged, but they found nothing. Not a single trace. They offered to set up patrols that night, to which I accepted. As of writing this, it is 8 p.m. and I'm almost about to go to bed. I don't even know if I will get any sleep tonight. I don't feel safe in my own home. I think I know how they get in. I have had run-ins with the supernatural. After my experiences of terror and constant torment, I have developed a theory. A theory around how they get in and find ways to torment us, scare us, and even hurt us. Hear me out. Getting sick is an unfortunate situation where weaknesses in our body's armor are exploited or circumvented. The armor against the unseen world that seeks to get inside of us, take up residence, and perhaps not by any conscious malice, cripple or kill us. These things are all around us. We breathe them in, we swallow them, we lay on them when we sleep. They live innocuously enough on our skin, hair, and in the contortions of our gut. Most of the time, we fight them off and remain happily ignorant of these invisible, horrific, microscopic wars happening on and in our bodies. We owe our survival to this mighty feature within us to ward off these things that seek to subsist in our bodies. Science calls it the immune system, the symphonic legions of soldiers, each equipping unique weaponry suited to their respective functions and working with cascading cooperation. They collectively preserve our flesh and prevent it from becoming a carcass, devoured by colonies of tiny germs. Most of us know the immune system of the body, but few know of the other immune system, the one that watches over our mind, spirit, and self. What prevents us from losing these defining features of our humanity? Have you ever seen something at the edge of your periphery, only for it to vanish when you turn to it? Heard footsteps in your house only to find nothing upon investigating the sound? Felt that familiar, but foreboding feeling of being alone but having a sensation that someone was in the room with you? Felt an indescribable feeling in which you don't know why, but there seemed to be some silent alarm within you, urging you to leave that particular room or not enter that certain house. It may feel like some subconscious mechanism in you trying to warn you you're in danger. Much like shadows in the night that looked like monsters staring at us in our bed while we pretended to sleep, we chalk it up to our minds playing tricks on us. Children, whose physical and psychological development is still ongoing and incomplete, are particularly vulnerable to such breaches by this unseen supernatural world. More commonly, they catch colds, the flu, and other infections more often than their parental counterparts, often paralleled by their fear of the dark, their sightings of monsters in the closet or under their beds, and the sounds they hear in their rooms at night, displaying an incomplete mental immunity to the beings who sit at the edge of the world opposite ours, continuously attempting to exploit them in the midst of their development. Like bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protozoa, they are largely invisible, yet have remained an ever-present component of our surroundings. The man in your room at night, the sounds you hear upstairs, and that feeling that someone is standing over you are not mere sensory phantoms. These ubiquitous experiences are shared by us all, despite vast socio-cultural, religious, and economic variability across the world. They are very real, and throughout time have remained pervasive among us as humans. It is this mysterious, unknown mechanism, biological or otherwise, that protects us from these things that would seek to prey on us. It is in times of grief, stress, or instability, however transient, that your mind becomes increasingly susceptible. Times where we may see or hear one of these things. Much like a mild sniffle or sore throat, when there is a chink in this protective armor, these entities that live amongst us make themselves apparent to us. Pay extra attention to your surroundings the next time you are mentally ill, grieving, or otherwise depressed. Like me, you may be surprised or even terrified by what you might see. So I am here to tell you, this is how they get in. Usually this system, as best can be described, can fight them off, but occasionally they may get through and manifest as the ghost story that no one believes. As we conclude this bone-chilling installment of Cicada Rising, we urge you to join our community by liking, sharing, and subscribing. To submit your own stories, contact us at mhpicadon@gmail.com, including Cicada Rising in the subject line. Until our paths cross again, remember, the darkness is only as frightening as the secrets it conceals. Stay vigilant, stay connected, and keep the fear alive with Cicada Rising.